In this session, we're going to go ahead and give you a little bit of information on some tips of basically feeding your horses that you're going to be housed within the feedlot to try to keep them as good and healthy and work to the level of performance that you really would like these horses to work at. Much of this is going to be quite basic, however, and so feeding your horses, you're already going to have a lot of the feedstuffs around, and it should be very simple, but be sure that you're quite safe with how you're going to feed your horses. The basic plan for any horse diet really needs to focus on the hay, the type of roughage that they will be consuming. Most of your horses most likely will be dry lotted. If they're allowed to be on pasture, that's a plus, but we're going to mainly focus on those horses that are in the dry lot, the small pen situation. Remember that horses need a minimum of 1% of their body weight in forages, and we usually look to provide them or ensure that they're getting about 1.5% of their body weight in some type of forage or hay. So if you think of our average stock horse, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, that's in the neighborhood of about 15 pounds of hay in a day that those horses should be eating. We really look at two main types of hays, your legumes, or here we look at alfalfa or grass hays. And it is a lot with your own management decisions as far as if you're going to feed alfalfa or if you're going to feed grass hay. Just have a basic understanding of some of the differences between the two of them, and alfalfa hay is going to have a higher energy content, which is going to allow you to feed a little bit fewer total pounds of the alfalfa hay. In addition, so the energy content of your alfalfa is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.2 megacals of energy per pound of hay. The protein content also is going to be higher than that of most of your grass hays, and it can be pretty highly variable, somewhere in that range of 15 to 20% protein. In addition, alfalfa hays will be higher in calcium content than your grass hays. In contrast with your grass hays, which could be prairie hay, brome hay, usually a combination of different types of native grasses, grass hays will tend to have a lower content of energy, about 0.6 to 0.9 megacals of digestible energy, and a lower protein content of 6 to 12%. The calcium and phosphorus ratios are generally about 1 to 1. Grass hays work just fine for feeding your horses, and either hay is very acceptable, and you just might have to adjust a little bit of the amount of hay that you feed with grass versus alfalfa because of the lower energy content of your grass hay. Now, in addition to your hay, you may or may not choose or need to supplement with some type of grain. We will also visit about the condition score of your horses, and the most important thing is that you do maintain them in a good body condition. Regardless of whether you're providing a grain ration or feeding those horses straight hay, they will need to be provided some type of trace mineralized salt. All right? All horses need some salt. Some horses, if they are maintaining a good body condition on a good quality hay, they can have a diet of 100% hay. However, they all will need some type of trace mineralized salt because they will not be getting this from the hay, or even if those horses on pasture, they still would need a trace mineralized salt. This can be provided free choice. It generally is provided free choice. Could be either in a salt block form or in loose form, but just out there so the horses can consume it at random or at free choice whenever they choose. Now, the decision whether or not to add grain to your horse's ration is going to depend a lot on the level of work and how those horses are maintaining their body condition. Sometimes behavior is also an issue because in order to catch those horses, a little bit of enticement with grain sometimes helps you to be able to catch those horses quite well. Also, a little bit on the age of the horse. If you happen to have some young horses out there, some 2-year-olds, some 3-year-olds, some 4-year-olds, horses that are still growing and developing, then some supplementation of grain might be a good idea to help ensure that they are receiving all the various nutrients and minerals and vitamins and such not that they need to develop nice to their potential. In addition, depending on the level of work, some supplementation of grain might be needed so they do maintain their weight and do not lose any weight on you. As far as how much grain you should feed, kind of the range looks at between 0.5 to 1% of that horse's body weight. So somewhere in the range of 6 to 12 pounds per day, and they might not even need as much as 6 pounds. If they're staying nice and in good body condition, they might need only 1 to 2 pounds of grain per day. All right. If those horses start to work a little bit more, you might need to increase the hay slightly and have a slight increase of grain, or 1 to 2 pounds, if you've only increased the amount of work to a small degree. If at certain times of the year then you're working those horses substantially more, then you're going to need to provide them additional energy to meet that additional energy that they're expelling from the amount of work that they are doing. So to meet that increased energy needs, you might have to increase the grain to a little higher degree, and in order for them to consume enough, you might have to drop the hay off just a little bit. But remember, the minimum that any horse should be consuming on hay is 1% of their body weight. So again, that 1,000-pound horse should be eating at least 10 pounds of hay in a day, and that's going to ensure for his normal digestive function, and so that he doesn't have problems of colic and various things for eating too much grain, and that we have good digestive function of those horses' digestive systems. Now, in looking at the type of grain ration, it can be fairly flexible. Many folks look at the protein content when determining the type of feed for their horses, and somewhere in that 10 to 12% protein feed for your grain mix is probably going to be just fine. In our area, many times those are going to be based of a combination of corn and oats and various ratios to make the amount of energy and protein to the correct degree. Again, how much you're going to feed those horses, it might be 2 to 6 pounds. It could be up as much as 12 pounds. So then look at the rule of thumb as far as how frequent you need to feed those horses, depending on how much grain they're actually consuming. So the bottom line we like to use is that if you need to feed those horses more than 6 pounds of grain in a day, then you need to split those into 2 feedings. And again, the amount that you're going to feed the horse will depend a lot on that individual horse and also the amount of work that they're doing. Then what type of hay do you need? I mean, we already mentioned and talked about if you're going to feed grass hay or alfalfa, and either one is acceptable, just depending on your management, what you probably are already purchasing for your lot, and what is available. And in all of these types of hays, they are generally available in small square bales, large square bales, or round bales. And as many of you know, there are some pretty differences in prices of these different kinds of bales. Some will determine, if you want small squares, on how you need to manage it, how you're going to be feeding those horses. Are they in small pens? Are they in lots? Is that going to be the most simple and best way for you to handle your hay? You can have some small carts like this to move that hay around if you're using small square bales. Other things that sometimes are more economically feasible and in a certain management situation or housing situation work just fine. This is a large square bale. This is a large square bale of alfalfa, and we've put a tarp over it to help keep the weather and the elements from molding the hay, and then this hay is sliced off and forked off into some feeders into the pen. So that's another option. If you happen to be in a stall situation, sometimes these are more difficult to handle. However, to set this close and fork off and peel off portions of the hay to the different horses in a pen can be a pretty efficient method to feed those horses. Round bales really are another option, and we have a lot of round bales in our country, both of alfalfa and also of grass hay. Here you have some round bales that are just stored. This is a round bale that's set up on the end where it is, again, close proximity to the lots, and the hay is just forked off of the round bale into the lot where the horses are. Here's a couple of different very similar types of round bale feeders that can be put in a dry lot situation or left out there in a pasture situation for those horses.